Good afternoon, and I will need tweeting lessons from whoever won the Twitter contest because a long time ago I declared that Twitter was not my land of communication, and I really need to fix that. So thank you all for being here today. I want to share a little bit about my journey over the last 30 years in enterprise tech. It was so amazing to hear the stories earlier today because there are so many consistent themes amongst the women who have been on stage. And one of the things that I've come to realize, and I think Liz talked about this a little bit in her presentation, is often it's that little voice inside of us that creates these self-limiting beliefs. And that is such a powerful thing to recognize. And when she described that plane flight and meeting that soon-to-be mentor, sponsor, and realizing that she should go out and start a company because the alternative to starting a company was the drudgery of the status quo. And that's my word, drudgery, not her word. I have a really similar journey that I'm going to describe for you, and I think it's just so interesting that as women, this is the consistent theme. So hopefully, at the end of today, we're all going to be empowered to break through this. And I had only wished that Jess and Meredith were around 30 years ago when I started my career, and I could have been in this room. So let me tell you a little bit about my career. So growing up in the Massachusetts area, I always heard one consistent theme from my dad, and that was that there's always a better way. Now you have to create context for this. My dad was an engineer. I would call him a frustrated inventor. He was a lot like Karatakis Potts from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Do you guys remember the father? And he ran R&D for an old line tech company in Massachusetts. And this idea of there was always a better way was discussed incessantly in our household. At dinner at night, we were asked to substantiate our ideas. I was one of four. And we were asked how we were going to improve on our ideas and also how we were going to impact the world in a positive way. So it was an intense upbringing. But I realized that it had a huge impact on how I thought about the world and how I thought about my role in enterprise tech. Okay, our house was always filled with inventions. Self-fabricated, tech shop users in the room. We had a tech shop at home, often quirky. And the funniest invention my dad made when there were three of us in diapers in the early 60s, I have a twin, so that's why there were three, was the pooper scooper. And the pooper scooper was a hose attachment to the toilet, kind of like the hose you have on your sink, and it was designed to spray off cloth diapers so they could be slightly clean and then put in a bin, and then that bin was brought to the washing machine, and hundreds of diapers were washed per day in our household. So this innovation was super helpful to my dad and to my mom because of the number of diapers that we were producing on a daily basis. So my dad thought about commercializing this, but he became the accidental roadkill of Procter & Gamble with the introduction in those years of Pampers. Right? So that was the second lesson of my childhood, which is disruption always wins. Dad's invention was helpful, but it was ultimately just incremental, right? Still a cloth diaper, still very inconvenient, still very stinky. But this is the case for a lot of businesses. And it's really the calling card of enterprise tech and consumer tech that it's about the disruption. That's what makes these multi-billion-dollar franchises. So when you look at the inventions that I've shared here on this slide, like, can you imagine giving up your addicting mobile device for a phone? Because it's not a phone anymore. Would you ever give up the cloud? Imagine the servers in your home and the maintenance that you would have to do on your own local cloud. And then my favorite invention of all, this is actually an NEA company, the wearable breast pump. This product just went production. I only wish 20 years ago it had existed when I gave birth to my oldest daughter. And it's a breast pump that you can actually insert into your blouse on either side. It collects the milk. It sends a message to your cell phone with how much milk you've pumped. It seals the bag, ladies, and you're done. Can you imagine? I can't imagine going back to the old way. And I won't go into the detail on that because I don't want to freak anyone out in this room. So this idea of disruption always wins has become a big theme in my career. So let me take you through the last 30 years as quickly as I can and share a couple lessons. I heard the groan with Oracle. When I joined Oracle, it was a $100 million startup. It was the hot company, ladies. Relational technology was sexy and very elegant as a technology breakthrough. And I had the luck of being hired in the late 80s, fresh out of graduate school. I got my graduate degree in public policy, so hats off to Meredith, to Jess, to all of us who have non-technical degrees and transitioned into tech. And I had a friend who was hired at Oracle, and she said, this is a rocket, just get a seat on the rocket. So I started at the bottom of the company, really at the bottom of the company, probably the lowest paid employee in the company. And my first big job was that of a product manager. And I was a product manager for our application development tools, and I applied that better way principle to my work. And I really thought about trying to reinvent the space. We were going up against new incumbent competitors like PowerSoft and also Microsoft, which is a big, fierce competitor. So I really thought about what is the better way to get my product to market, to help the market understand the capabilities of my product. And this is before the internet. So it was a very different approach to bringing your products to market. I was very successful in my role until one day I realized that my success was capped. I sat down with my boss, we had a one-on-one, and he casually said to me, and I'm grateful for this, but you will probably groan. He casually said to me, we're really impressed with your work. You do great work, but we just don't know how you're getting it done because you're not technical. Now, you have to realize I was surrounded by product managers who had been handpicked out of Caltech, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and I was the exception. I had a liberal arts background. I was a woman. Most of them were men. And I had been trying really hard to compete in this functional area of the company in a culture that regaled the technical degree. I can't tell you how important it was to have this credential with double E or computer science next to your degree. And so I heard that feedback, and I knew right away, I was just crestfallen. I mean, I think there were a couple things that really struck me. One was at 21 or 23 that somehow the degree that had been conferred upon me would sort of write my life story. And that, we all know that's not true. And the second, and probably more important, is that my now husband, then boyfriend, who was very technical from Caltech, the implication was that he was helping me. And he wasn't. So that he was horrified, I was horrified, and that's when I realized perception is reality, and I need to find a space in this rocket where I can rock it. And I moved to sales. I had spent a lot of time in sales over the course of my career as a product manager, selling the product that most of the salespeople didn't understand how to sell in front of customers. And so I moved to sales, and what I realized right away was I could write my own report card, and it was an unbelievable meritocracy, and at the time for women that was a wonderful thing, and it was hard to come by. There was only one outcome number, revenue generated. How do you think perception counted in sales? Not at all. And guess what? I was really technical in sales, which made it all the sweeter. Anyway, in sales, I was very successful, and I was able to build new models, new go-to-market models for Oracle Corporation. At this point, we're becoming a bigger company. We're multiples of billions. And I was soon responsible for some of the largest divisions in the company and taking those strategies and globalizing them, which exposed me to the external marketplace, and it was a blast. As I approached 2 decades at the company, I was there for 18 years, I realized I needed a change. And that's when I made the decision to go to Intuit, where I took a head of sales role in an executive committee spot, and I focused on learning about the consumer tech and the SMB. That was a great run. It lasted about 3 years before Mark Benioff came a knocking on my door very persuasively and said, I saw you in action at Oracle. I want you to come up to my small company, Salesforce, and run half the sales organization at that time. So Salesforce was a $500 million business. I went up there. I did say to him, Mark, I'm a little worried about the global economy. We're hearing the banks. It's 2008 is the backdrop, by the way. I was there for 90 days, and the Great Recession hit. And it was a scary time for everybody. I don't think I'd seen two big external market resets over the course of my career at Oracle. But I don't think I'd ever seen the fear that I saw in 2008, where companies were worried about their very viability. And I had just come in. I was the latest executive into the company, and I ran the sales organization. And guess what customers were telling us? We are not increasing the size of our sales organizations right now. We're trying to figure out what's going on in our market. So when you're faced with that condition, a really scary external event, you can do one of three things. You can freeze, you can punt to somebody else, or you can do something about it. And I knew that this was a massive but risky opportunity for the company to go take share. Because when you're in a contracting market, what happens is the person that takes the bigger piece of the pie, even though the pie is smaller temporarily, what happens to them? They win. And they win big, especially when the market comes back, because there's elasticity in that market. And that's what we did at Salesforce. So over the course of my tenure there, we were able to 10x the size of the company from a revenue perspective. I'm probably proudest of that outcome. So now I'll pause for a minute, and I'll go back to the title of my presentation, which is Becoming Better. I would tell you that early in my career, I became better for my boss. And then I sort of moved my loyalty to the company. And then at this point in my career, I started thinking about becoming better for myself. And that's when I made the decision that I probably had one last stop in tech. I've now been in the industry 26 years. And I wanted to go help yet another small company go public and pivot to realize that billion-dollar dream. And the company that I chose was New Relic. If you don't know New Relic, they're all about digital intelligence, measuring customer experience with digital applications of all types. So I joined the company, and it was a $60 million market cap. 4 years later today, it's a $4 billion market cap. We successfully went public a year after I joined the company. We changed the trajectory of the company. We entered new segments. We globalized. It was a great success story. And at 30 years, and I know everyone's doing the math. Yes, I'm older than 53. At 30 years, I decided after millions of miles, figuratively and literally on the seats of planes, that I was going to retire from operating roles. And so last spring, I announced my retirement, which happened in June. I had this concept that I was just going to do board roles. Turns out that didn't keep me busy enough, according to my teenage daughters. And NEA approached me and gave me this idea that was so appealing, which was I could join the firm as a venture capitalist and have a platform of growth companies to help them grow the way I had helped other companies grow. And that's when I moved from operator to investor. So that's the 30 years. So I hope that you got something out of that story. And I want to share with you 2 lessons from my personal playbook from a business perspective, and then I'll finish on a personal perspective. There's one essential ingredient to winning in enterprise tech. People ask me all the time, what is the one thing you did to help these companies grow? And there's no one thing, but there's a fundamental thing. And it's all about market share. So when you're building a company, you have to think about the segments that your offering will appeal to. And the best bet is a big TAM. We heard Liz, I think, talk about TAMs earlier today, or Julia. The best opportunity is the largest TAM possible, that you can play in the enterprise, that you can play in the mid-market, that you can play in the SMB. Turns out the most profitable segment early for a company when you're in the early growth stages is actually the mid-market, because there are fewer barriers to entry. The customer has a real need. They're willing to experiment with technology. They're a little less risk adverse, and they will go fast. And you actually build up your reputation and move into the enterprise. The story that I told you at Salesforce, where we didn't know what to do when there was that global Great Recession, this idea of taking market share, having maniacal focus on taking market share, whether it be good times or bad times, it's fundamental to the success of your company as an early company and as a later stage growth company. This is fundamental. And what that allows you to do is actually expand your wallet position in the market when the market comes back. So that's lesson number one. Try to get the largest addressable market that you can. Lesson two is about the competition. I hear time and time again from people that they don't like to study their competitors. They don't like to look at their competitors. And this comes often from a good place where they're concerned that the competitor will pollute their thinking. And I think there's validity in that. But I also think that you can be naive in not really thinking about your competitors. So I have a really simple playbook that I like to teach people. 3 things of the competition. Respect them, study them, beat them. Okay, respect them. Why? They see what you see, right? You're in it together. They see what you see. And oh, by the way, they're going to help you build a new category if it's a new category. The faster they win, the faster you win, the bigger the category. Respect them so that you will study them. When you study them, most of us think about their offering and we think about features, but it's everything about the competition. It's their product, it's their pricing, it's their architecture. It's the way they place their products. It's how they treat their customers. It's their business practices. It's the whole thing. And when you look at the most successful, most disruptive companies in the enterprise, they have not only brought a new product to market, they've brought a new business model to market, a new financial model. Look at the impact of subscription on the old licensing models of old enterprise tech. It caught everybody flat-footed. That's the power. And then finally, you beat them. Because if an organization doesn't have a competitor to think about, they become complacent. Exactly. And you want your organization, no matter what function you have, to never be complacent. Now, there are times when you will feel like a natural monopoly, where you feel like there's so much business coming to the company and you're sort of, resting on your laurels. Oh, isn't this great? We're going to Davos to celebrate our success. We're going to go ring the bell. That is the time to be concerned as a leader that you have competitors that will catch you off guard, and they're going to reinvent on the business model, not just on the offering. And so it's so important to teach your organization to always be beating the competition so that they're not complacent about the opportunity. Okay, 2 big business lessons. Now we're going to go to the personal lesson. And that is, and I hope that this is a gift for you. I know we've gone through a couple of these exercises today. But let me give you the backdrop. I'll share a little secret with you. If you had known me in my early career, you would know that if I had to interview for a new job, and this is like I wasn't just placed in a new job, which often happens in startups, which, again, Oracle was a startup at one point. If I had to interview for a job and there was a qualified slate of candidates, I was terrible. I sucked. I would utter things, and I say utter because I had no voice. I would utter things about like hard work, I'll work harder, and hard work. I have a proven track record of hard work, but I had this inability to talk about my skills and capabilities. And it was kind of shocking even to myself. I'd blush in the interview, so I'd have this physical response to the stress of having to talk about myself. There was this incredible disconnect between what I could do when I was in the position and my ability to articulate what I'm doing. And a lot of this was because the rational side of me would say, well, this isn't me, it was the team, and I was just happened to be there, and I helped, and I had all these words in my head for why it wasn't me. I also think that culturally, I've been brought up, just, culturally, in the larger culture writ large, to not feel comfortable talking about my own capabilities. And this is like a serious deterrent to my career, despite the fact that you may like the trajectory of what you saw. So I dreaded interviews. I've actually missed interviews, probably due to anxiety. I dreaded interviews. But 7 years ago, I had a breakthrough. I went to a workshop that McKinsey put on. It was led by Joanna Barsh and Susie Cranston. Some of you may know them. They wrote a book, an amazing book called How Remarkable Women Lead, which is really inspiring. And at this workshop that looked a lot like this room, they made us go through an exercise where we had to envision what our role and goal would be 5 years into the future. And we had to write for 20 minutes about where we would be 5 years into the future. And at the end of 20 minutes, pencils went down, and we had to share with the other women at our table what our narrative said. So for me, the words flowed. I didn't want to be an operator 5 years from then. I wanted to have board positions, and I wanted to help growth companies. And I had no idea what this path looked like. I didn't think I was qualified to be on a board of directors, despite all my accomplishments in my career. But the next step of this exercise was to go write tangible goals for getting to this career. So I wrote those out, and I started consulting with people I knew who were on boards, and I started asking them for, hey, I started sharing my narrative. Hey, much like Liz did on the plane, I'm thinking that for my next chapter, I want to be on boards. What do you think about my qualifications? What do you think I need to think about? And from those meetings, these people gave me the words I needed to talk about my capabilities, because the response was overwhelming. People said, you're great at this, you're good at this, you've done this, you've experienced this. And they wrote my narrative. They were my co-authors, no longer my words, their words. I wrote these words down, just like we saw that I think Rosa did. And that became the narrative, and sure enough, within a year, not 5 years, a year, I had a board role. Yeah, I was blown away by this. So, quick exercise. Close your eyes. We're going to do this for 30 seconds. Look 5 years into the future. See the words. Where will you be in terms of a role? What's your number one goal? Take a picture of those words in your head, and on the break that follows, write that down, because that's the beginning of your narrative. We will co-author together with you at this event and follow-on events how you get there. Thank you.